Huples Cat. I want to talk about intersectionality and you, and of course me. And I want to talk about it in terms of how we live our lives and how our lives can react and be altered by intersectionality in grid down, in shtf when there's a pandemic, when our normal society fails. So this is the normal way of looking at intersectionality, a system of interactions between inequality creating social structures, i.e. of power relations, symbolic representations and identity constructs that are context specific, topic oriented, inexorably linked to social praxis. I hate praxis. We have a thing called nursing praxis. It's the intersection, if you will, of theory with doing stuff. I'm not quite sure what is exactly not praxis in the world other than high theoretical stuff, but there you go. Anybody doing any physical job is actually doing praxis in that job because they are applying a degree of theory to that job. Now around about now you can go, oh no, the vegan liberal is going to start going on and on about the President of the United States. No, I'm not. This is actually much bigger than him. This is a huge thing. What I want to talk about in the first phase of this is I want to look at us and you. All of those events that could occur that could alter for the worse your actual life. This includes winning the lottery, by the way. Most lottery winners, once they've won the lottery, end up dying early, getting drug addictions and having quite miserable lives. My advice if you win the lottery is to invest most of it straight away and give a lot of it away, and don't make a big deal about being very, very rich. Don't alter your current lifestyle at all. Just do it very gently and very gradually. So what is prepper intersectionality? Prepper intersectionality is all of the human and natural systems that create your personal safety or unsafety. They're bound to social, economic, racial, educative, health and natural systems. They may or may not only interact with you in specific situations or contexts. Another way of looking at this is looking at power. Critical theory, which is Marxist in origin, looks at a lot of this stuff from the lens of power theory. Who has power, who is being controlled by the power, the effects of having power on the oppressed and on the oppressor. So all of that stuff, Paulo Freire did a whole bunch of stuff on that. I'm not really going to go into that with this particular video. What I do with this particular video is where I'm going with it, is I want to show that our happy little normal lives actually only exist because of a massive range of known and unknown forces that allow us to function in our specific ways. The way we function may not be as an oppressor or as the oppressed, but in certain contexts, almost always human interactions, there is some degree of oppression or being oppressed. That's just the way it is. But it's to understand where all of those linkages are coming into you, in your family, in 2020 in June. Where is it going to go? Nobody knows. What's going to happen? Nobody knows. A lot of people online will tell you definitive things about how the world is going to transform itself over the next few months to a year and tell you specific steps to do. There is some specific steps that cover most issues. One of the many problems with human beings is that we tend to look at the issue we're facing today as the issue. For example, in April and May, the main issue around the world was the coronavirus pandemic, and now that pandemic is starting to come out of the first wave. People largely are tending to discount that and are just focusing on racial relations, and I think that's a really interesting one. For example, one of my commentators who I really respect, and I won't name her, actually said to me, stop calling them protesters in my videos because they're rioters. And that's absolute nonsense. Obviously the vast majority of people are protesting and are using their First Amendment right in America to do so, and are not looters and are not rioters. And to say, well, if they didn't protest, there'd be no excuse for the rioting. Yes, but you could also say if there was no police, there would be no death, therefore there would be no rioting. Or you could say if the police hadn't been violent, there would be no etc, etc. But that misses the point. All three of those levels miss the point of intersectionality. The race violence that we're experiencing across the world, and the protests against it, and the illegal looting and rioting that's happening in some places, is actually an intersection of a whole bunch of different things. So I'm not going to go into race and racial relations. It's a very complicated topic, and that's one of the problems we have in modern society, is we like to look at very complex topics in very simple ways. For example, if only there were no liberals, we'd have a happy economy. If only there was no right-wing corporates, we'd all have lots of money and have lots of power. If only there was no police, I wouldn't feel threatened. If only the police would machine gun these people, my business wouldn't be trashed. And on it goes. But I just want to show you, for those people out there who do not think there is systemic racism, I'm actually going to look at Australia. And the reason I'm looking at Australia, because largely it's been discounted from North American consciousness, but they have a long history of invading and colonizing and in fact engaging in genocide in Tasmania against the native population, the original inhabitants. And obviously if anybody came into America or Canada and tried to kill us and wipe us out and took away all our money, all our power, all our lands, we would have a resentment towards that racial group, that national group if you like. Australia has very serious problems, as does Canada, as does South Africa, as does North America in general, including Mexico. A lot of Mexican power is in the hands of the descendants of the Spanish, not in the hands of the original inhabitants. So to prove my point, Australian rugby has not been playing with people in the stands, though I think they are starting to now. So people can pay money to buy pictures to put in the stands, and there's been some very funny ones. And I'll just show you one now. So when you look at this picture, it looks normal, it looks fine. The problem is only 24% of Australians are white. So two things are in play here. One is economic power. The economic power to buy the pictures is in the hands of the whites. The interest in having the time and luxury to go to sports events like this is mostly in the hands of the white group. But there's a lot of racially different people who both play that game and watch it, but they're not being represented even in the pictures of the stands. I guess you could argue that they are being represented, the 76% are being represented by Elmo. I could do this for any country in the world, but I'm choosing Australia because it's reasonably neutral in terms of my viewing audience, and obviously racial riots in your own city has emotional context. And I appreciate that, and I'm not here to talk about why or what to do about that. What I'm doing is saying it's just a great example of intersectionality, how things are affecting and propping up our lifestyles, and when they are removed or altered, our safe lifestyle that we've been enjoying and maybe not even assuming is under threat for some people would actually be wiped out quite quickly in a matter of days, hours, weeks, easily wiped out. If the intersectionality of all of the factors, and I'll put some of them up now, any of those planks are removed, the whole house of our safety collapses. And in terms of prepping, we tend to look at one specific discrete event. And people have always been saying, well, SHTF is going to be multiple events, cascading, and probably overwhelming your plans and prepping response. And that's something we don't want to think about, because we want to believe that our prepping response can cope with, successfully, all SHTFs other than a major wipeout of the planet by an asteroid. But we can't actually relax in terms of prepping now because of the coronavirus is going away. It's dropping, it's coming down the curve, but it's still the first wave. If there is a second wave, we are, for historical and immunological reasons, hugely at risk of having a much higher death count in the second wave or the third wave or the fourth wave than we did in the first wave. So that's not great. But when you then throw in political instability, or you throw in war, or you throw in drought, or you throw in flash floods, or you throw in hurricanes in your local areas, if you throw in, say, a wheat blight, if you throw in a rice blight, if you throw in almost anything, the ability to maintain normal life, the intersection of everything that gives us normal life, rapidly collapses. And that's my concern. I'm not sure a lot of preppers out there are understanding just what's being required to be done to protect them in the here and now. For years, preppers have had a feeling, and now most people in society have a feeling, that our current lifestyle is unsustainable. As we approach 8 billion people on the planet, we won't be able to feed them all. Some of them will starve to death, and some of them will try and kill us rather than starve to death. Some people understand that the planet's warming up due to human action, and that this will alter insect and plant and animal life dramatically, it may in fact result in human extinction, complete loss of humanity. That's no big deal. The planet will recover eventually and do okay. But the thing of it is, you can't prep for apocalypse. Other than spiritually, I guess. But you can't prep for apocalypse. What you can prep for is you need to know where your food sources are coming from, where your water's coming from, where your clothing's coming from, where your batteries are coming from, where your car's coming from, where the fuel for the car, hydro, electricity, where all of that gas, all of that stuff, where is it coming from? How dependent are you on oppression of others to maintain your lifestyle? Because we all oppress others. How do we get lithium for cell phones, etc., etc.? It goes on and on and on. So you can't just kill yourself and you can't live a non-oppressing lifestyle. What you can do is try not to oppress wherever you can. Try to make conscious decisions not to oppress others just because it's normal to do so. And by that, what I mean is, try not to stare with anger and hatred at people who look different from you just because they look different from you. Try to understand that the intersectionality is what keeps people poor, uneducated and violent. It isn't their natural characteristics at all. And although it may be comforting from a superior position to believe that if I was in their state, I would get a job, I would create a business, I would get myself out of the ghetto, I would do this, I would do that, I wouldn't allow the police to treat me like that. On and on it goes. You miss the plot. The intersectionality is what's keeping different classes of people and different races of people down. And the more of them that there are compared to the more of us, and the worse we treat them and the worse the inequality becomes, and it is worsening, the more likely it is to result in violence. And preppers online are showing riot kits, little kits they're carrying with them in case they get stuck in a riot. Much better to avoid the riot, physically, but also societally. So where you can, do what you can to try and avoid rioting. Do what you can to secure your own food and water supply. Do what you can to secure your own safety. Don't always rely on the police being able to come and respond to you, or in fact coming and responding to you in ways that you like. That is not a given. Nothing is a given. There's multiple factors making up what is going on in June 2020, and we haven't seen the worst of this yet. I keep telling people 2020 is going to be a very, very bumpy year. I don't think we're through the worst of this. Canada's still got over 13% unemployed, so is the United States. I expect that to improve. But we're still going to be left with a residual hardcore unemployment, I think, of between 5 to 9%, mostly centred in our cities, mostly affecting the Black and the First Nations people within the cities, and women disproportionately. And this is not a plea for female rights or for Black Lives Matter. What this is a plea for is for selfishness. If human beings are segregated to the point of violence, none of us can do safety. None of us are safe. They're not safe, we're not safe. And we could be by certain economic and certain social and certain government actions. But I don't believe in waiting for those things. You need to do your own ways of doing it now. You need to make a point now of being a different type of person, knowing that you are an oppressor by your very nature, the fact you can afford the internet and watch me. You are an oppressor group, whether you feel it or not. At the same time, all oppressor groups are being oppressed as well. So the reaction of violence is a normal one. It's also, as I said before, a grief response. I explained that President Trump was actually threatening violence to the protesters, not just the looters, but the protesters, and he acted on that. But he's doing that out of grief. He's losing his power. He's losing his ability to go, November's going to be a cakewalk against crazy old Joe Biden. And it really should be, and it still might be. But it's looking very unlikely because events have intersected to remove his security and his safety. And the more safe and secure you are, the more oppressing you are, the more angry, the more furious you will become.
Protesters have taken to the streets across America to express their concerns and anger over the death of George Floyd.
Police have reason to be angry about last night. They are still counting their injured. One officer had his teeth knocked out. 4 others sitting in a marked van when police say a young woman from Catskill threw a Molotov cocktail inside. Miraculously, no one was burned.
We practice de-escalation.
Yo!
Move back, move back, move back, move back, move back, move back.
I am moving back. I'm moving back.
When you see symbols and actions that are removing your personal safety and your personal power and handing it to other groups, this is not something we enjoy. However, it can be a great creative event. It can actually make people happy. But we've got a long way to go. We are facing a pandemic that is real, that is just completing its global first wave. There may or may not be a second wave in about 3 to 6 weeks from today. There may or may not be a great economic depression. There almost definitively will be at least a year of severe economic recession. There's going to be severe stress on our food supply, both by the coronavirus and by economics, and also, I believe, by climate instability. There's also going to be increasing war around the planet as people start to literally fight for water access and for land, because a lot of places are filling up rapidly. The petri dish is getting smothered. Most of the habitable land on the earth now has asphalt on it or chemicals on it, mostly from petrochemicals, which is poisoning it to feed the people who are living on the asphalt. This is not sustainable. We all know that. But where are we going to turn it around and change this? We probably won't. Our species is a very short-sighted species. We deal with what's at the end of our nose. We kind of discount what's over here. So climate change doesn't seem to be a very real threat because it's 11 years down the road, or 5 years down the road, or 20 years down the road, or you believe that the global solar minimum that could drop the temperature of the planet by 0.3 to 0.6 centigrade is actually going to make us an ice age, even though you probably have figured out the global temperature is already up by 1.3 and higher. So it's not going to work. I wish it would. But it's a nice fantasy to believe that the threat is far enough away that you don't have to deal with it or be inconvenienced by it, and at the same time the threat is neutralized by, oh no, it won't be that, it'll be the opposite. So we have very strange swings and balances in our thought processes. So whether you believe in climate science or not, whether you understand racial relations or not, what you can do is go through the world being as decent and as nice and as compassionate to other people, and I would argue species as well. It's much more important to actually see the Earth as an integrated whole, not as a specific human environment. Without the nature, there is no human. Okay? Without human, nature will be just fine. Some things like bedbugs will die out, but that's a shame for them because they need humans. But very few things on the planet need you, but you need the planet. So the whole intersection of the social rage and violence that's going on with the protest, with the economic issues, with everything else, don't stand in a position of power. Don't stand with your health insurance and your pension and your garden to lock down in. And look at people living in tiny, non-air conditioned apartments with no parks anywhere near them and no money to buy food to arrive and nowhere to get food now because of looting and other issues. Don't look down upon those people as different from you. They are you. Intersectionality has created their life. Intersectionality has created yours. Understand and be aware of the fact that being alive is a huge and important gift. Helping others enjoy that is the most important thing you can do as a human being. At the same time, I am very cynical and very morose about the upcoming year. I do think that we do need as individuals to make sure that we do in fact get sufficient food and water and safety in place this week, or we will be in deep trouble. So remember, in SHTF, tomorrow will always be worse than today, unless you prep. And in a pandemic, tomorrow will always be worse than today until it's over, and it's not over. The other thing is, remember, intersectionality has created your lifestyle. It's not blind chance, it's not just good luck or bad luck, it's not just racial characteristics, because they don't actually cause anything. It is pure chance. You might be like me and lucky, or you may be like a lot of people and unlucky. We have to start doing what the Christian Bible and the Quran and the Torah and everything else tells us to do. We have to start shedding our power, shedding our wealth, or we are going to have it forcibly removed from us. Toodles. A 2020 Terrier production.